Hi everybody, this is your narrator Ali, and I hope you are ready to relax to our story today. Tonight we journey across sea and snow into a country called Whiteland, where 3 princesses are buried in the earth, where trolls wield 9 lashes at once, and where a fisherman's son must travel farther than he ever dreamed to find his way back to the one he loves. Chapter 1. The Fisherman's Bargain. Once upon a time, by the edge of a cold northern sea, there stood a king's palace of pale stone. Not far from its walls, in a small cottage of weathered wood, lived a fisherman and his wife. The fisherman's boat was so close to the royal harbor that when he cast his nets, the fish he drew up went straight to the king's kitchen, and the coins he earned kept bread on his table. One day he rowed out as usual, the sky low and gray above him, the water slapping gently against the hull. He cast his line again and again, changed bait, changed depth, changed place, but all in vain. The sea gave him nothing. Toward evening, as the light thinned and his stomach began to complain, he stared across the empty water and felt worry bite at him like the wind. "If I bring no fish to the king's table," he thought, "there will be no coin for our own. My wife will wait with the pot on the fire and nothing to fill it with." Just when hope had shrunk to almost nothing, the surface of the sea rippled. A curious sight rose up beside the boat, a head, and only a head, bobbing in the water. The eyes in that face were old and shrewd, like someone who had watched many storms pass. "If I may have what your wife carries under her girdle," the head said in a voice that seemed to echo from deep caverns under the sea, "you shall catch fish enough." The fisherman was startled, but hunger makes bold companions of us all. What could she carry under her girdle that you would want, he thought. Perhaps she has tucked away a bit of bread there, or a small purse. Without pondering further, he said, "Yes, you may have it." The head sank back beneath the waves, and almost at once the fisherman's luck changed. Fish bit on every hook. The net grew heavy, silver bodies thrashing and flashing in the fading light. By the time he turned his prow toward home, the boat was laden as it had never been before. His wife met him at the shore, delight flooding her tired face when she saw the catch. "What good a day at sea!" she cried. But when he told her the story of the head in the water and the promise he had made, her joy froze. "What I bear under my girdle," she whispered, "is not bread, nor coin, nor any trinket. It is our child. You have promised away our unborn child." The fisherman's heart sank as the meaning of his bargain struck him. He tried to comfort her, to say that perhaps the head would never return, that perhaps the sea cared nothing for such words once spoken. But the fear lodged between them like a stone. Their grief and the strange tale spread quickly through the harbor town and up to the palace. When the king heard what had happened, he sent a message to the cottage. "Let the child be brought to my house when it is born," he said. "I will raise it as my own and see if I can that no harm comes of this bargain." The fisherman and his wife, though still sorrowful, were grateful for this promise. If their child must be given up, better into the hands of a king than to some unknown force beneath the sea. So the months turned, and when the time came, the fisher's wife bore a son, bright-eyed and strong. The king took the child to his palace, and from that day the boy grew up in marble halls rather than in the low cottage by the shore. Chapter 2. The King's Foster Son and the Racing Boat. The boy grew straight and tall, with hair like dark copper and a quick, thoughtful gaze. He learned to read from scholars, to handle sword and spear from knights, and to speak with courtesy before nobles. Yet the smell of salt and tar still stirred something in him whenever he walked near the harbor. He knew that the fisherman and his wife, who lived in the small house by the water, were his true parents, and he visited them whenever he could. They loved him fiercely and humbly, proud of the young man he was becoming. One day, when he was nearly grown, he said to the king, "Father in all but blood, I long to go out with my first father in his boat. My heart yearns for the sea as his does. Let me spend one day with him upon the waves." The king frowned. "The sea is not to be trusted," he replied. "It has already tried to claim you once before you were even born. I promised your mother I would keep you safe." But the lad pleaded with such earnestness that the king, who loved him as dearly as if he were of his own flesh, yielded at last. "Go then," he said, "but only for a single day, and be back on this shore when the sun sets." The morning dawned bright and clear. The lad and the fisherman rowed out together, and the boy's arms thrilled to the pull of the oars, the lift and fall of the boat. They cast their nets, felt the tug of fish, and laughed like two boys together. All went well, and they turned back toward land as evening drew near. They had already beached the boat and unloaded the catch when a lad suddenly clapped a hand to his belt. "My handkerchief," he said. "I left it in the boat." "Let it be," his father urged. "We can fetch it tomorrow." "No, no," the lad answered lightly. "It was a gift. I will take but a moment." He stepped back into the boat. The instant his weight left the sand, the craft lurched as if some unseen rope had been cut. It shot from the shore with such force that the water roared beneath its bow. The fisherman shouted and waded after it, but in a heartbeat the boat was beyond his reach. The lad seized the oars and rowed with all his strength, but it was as though the sea itself had hold of the hull, drawing it ever farther from land. The sun slipped below the horizon. Stars pricked the sky. All through the night the boat flew over the black water, faster than any mortal hand could drive it. The lad rowed until his arms were numb, but he could not slow its flight. At last, toward dawn, the rushing eased. Mist thinned, and he saw before him a shore as white as bone. The boat slid up onto a pale strand that looked as though snow and sand had mixed together. He stepped out, stiff and weary, onto a land he had never seen. Chapter 3. The Old Man and the Three Princesses. The shoreline where he stood was quiet and strange. The sky had a pale, almost silvery hue, and the sea behind him lay smooth as glass. He walked a little way, listening to the soft crunch of the white sand under his boots. After a while, he met an old man coming along the strand. The man's beard flowed down to his waist, white as the sand itself, and his eyes were clear and deep. "What is the name of this land?" the lad asked. "Whiteland," the old man answered. "And what of you, young traveler? From where have you been blown, and to what end?" So the lad told him the whole tale, of the fisherman and his bargain, of the king's kindness, of the single day at sea, and of the boat that had carried him through the night to this strange shore. The old man nodded slowly, as if none of it surprised him. "You are further from home than you know," he said. "Yet this land has its own tasks for those who come unbidden. Walk on a little farther along the strand, and you will see 3 princesses. They stand in the earth buried up to their necks, with only their heads above the ground. They will call to you. The eldest will speak first, and then the second, each begging you most prettily to come and help her. Pay no heed. Walk past them, as if you neither see nor hear. Only when the youngest calls must you stop and listen. Do as she asks, and good fortune may still find you. "Why are they buried so?" the lad asked, troubled. "That you will learn," the old man replied. "Only remember what I have said." The boy thanked him and walked on. Before long he heard a voice, sweet and desperate, calling his name, though she could not know it. "Good youth, come help me," it cried. He turned and saw a maiden's head rising from the ground, crowned with hair like gold. Her eyes were large and pleading. "Come dig me out," she said. "I am a princess. Free me, and I will reward you." He remembered the old man's words, set his gaze ahead, and walked on despite the tug in his heart. Soon another voice called, softer and sadder than the first. He saw a second princess's head, dark-haired and fair, her tears slipping down onto the earth that held her fast. "Do not leave me here," she begged. Again he steeled himself and hurried on. At last he heard a third voice, quiet yet steady. "If you will do as I bid you," it said when he approached, "you may choose whichever of us you wish when all is done." He stopped and looked at her. Her features were finer than the others, not only in beauty, but in something deeper, a calm, wise glimmer in her eyes. She was the youngest, and in her gaze he felt a strength that matched his own. "I will do what you ask," he said. "Listen closely," she replied. "We three once lived in a castle that stands in the trees beyond this shore. 3 trolls came and cast us down into the earth. Only if one brave soul will bear their lashes in our stead, can we be freed. You must go into the castle and let a troll lash you one night for each of us. If you endure and live to strike them down, the spell will be broken." The lad swallowed, but his resolve held. "I will try," he said. "You must do more than try," she told him. "When you reach the castle, you will see 2 lions at the gate. Walk straight between them as though you saw nothing. They will not harm you then. Once inside, seek a small dark room and make your bed there. On the wall, you will find a flask filled with healing ointment and, beside it, a sword. When the troll has beaten you nearly to death, rub the ointment wherever his rods have fallen, and you will be made whole. Then seize the sword and strike him down before he can strike again." He nodded. "I will remember." "Then go," she said. "We will be watching." Chapter 4. 3 Nights in the Troll's Castle. The castle of Whiteland rose among the trees like a stone ship caught in branches. Its walls were gray and streaked with age. Its windows were black squares against the pale sky. The lad approached the gate. 2 lions carved of living rock stood on either side, their stone eyes gleaming. As he drew near, they stirred, claws scraping, mouths opening. His heart hammered, but he fixed his sight on the space between them and walked straight ahead, neither flinching nor turning aside. The lions sniffed the air but made no move. He passed unharmed. Inside, the corridors were silent. He found the small, dark room of which the princess had spoken. A narrow bed, a rough blanket, the flash of metal and glass on the wall, the sword and the flask. He lay down, though sleep did not come easily. Near midnight, the door rattled open. In lumbered a troll with 3 heads and 3 long rods of iron. "So," the monster growled. Here is the one who dares to steal my thralls from the earth. We shall see how you like the taste of my whips." He raised the rods and brought them down again and again. Each lash burned like fire. The lad's skin broke, his muscles screamed, but he clenched his jaw and refused to cry out. At last the troll grew tired and lowered his arms. "You are tougher than most," he muttered. But before he could leave, the lad, shaking, staggered to the wall, grabbed the flask, and smeared the ointment over his wounds. Coolness soaked into him. Pain ebbed. Strength flooded back as if the beaten had never been. In one swift motion he seized the sword and drove it into the troll's chest. The creature shrieked, all three heads howling together, then crumbled to dust at his feet. In the pale light of morning he stepped out of the castle. The three princesses still stood buried in the earth, but now they rose to their waists. "You have done well," the youngest called. "One more night, and then another, and our freedom will be complete." That evening he returned to the dark room. The second troll came with 6 heads and 6 rods. The blows fell twice as hard and twice as long. The lad staggered under them, but each time he thought of the princesses' faces and the promise in their eyes. When at last the troll paused, panting, the lad again took up the flask, healed himself, and with a sure stroke cut all 6 heads from their shoulders. The next morning the princesses stood only buried to their knees. "One more," said the youngest. "Hold fast." The third night was the worst. The troll who entered had 9 heads, each with eyes like burning coals, and 9 rods that whistled through the air like hissing snakes. He whipped the lad until he could no longer tell one pain from another. Blood ran into his eyes, his knees buckled, and at last he fell senseless to the floor. Seeing him motionless, the troll laughed cruelly. "You are not so strong after all," he sneered. He lifted the lad's limp body and flung it against the stone wall. By chance or by design, the impact jarred the flask from its hook. It fell and broke over the lad, bathing him in the last of the ointment. Like cool fire it seeped into his bones, knitting them, clearing his head. He opened his eyes with a gasp, stronger than before. The troll had turned away, certain his work was done. The lad rolled to his feet, grabbed the sword, and charged. A furious battle followed. 9 heads snapped and snarled, but the sword flashed faster. One by one the heads fell, each with a roar that shook the walls, until at last the troll lay sprawling, lifeless. In the morning, when he stepped out into the light, the 3 princesses stood wholly free, the earth fallen away from their feet. The youngest came forward, grace and gratitude shining in her eyes. "You have borne our pain," she said, "and broken our bonds. If you will have me, I shall be your queen." He took her hand. "There is no other I would choose," he replied. So they returned to the castle, now empty of trolls and full of sunlight. The trees around it stirred as if sighing with relief. There the lad and the youngest princess, now king and queen of Whiteland, lived in joy for many days. Chapter 5. Homeward Longing and the 2 Wishes. Time in Whiteland flowed like a serene river. The young king grew accustomed to the pale skies and the quiet shore. He and his queen walked in the forests and along the white strand where he had first arrived. He almost forgot the world he had left behind. Yet the memory of his father and mother, and of the king who had raised him, never quite faded. At odd moments, the smell of fish or the cry of a seabird would stir a longing in him, a desire to see their faces once more. At first, he kept this yearning to himself, but feelings left unspoken only grow stronger, and at last he went to his queen. "My heart pulls me toward home," he said softly, "only for a little while. I long to show my parents that I am safe and to thank the king who brought me up." Her face clouded. "I fear such journeys," she told him. "The world is full of turns we cannot foresee. Yet I see that your heart is set on this, and I will not hold you back like a prisoner." She drew from her finger a ring and placed it in his hand. "This ring carries 2 wishes," she said. "Use them wisely. Promise me one thing. Whatever your father asks of you, do it. But what your mother begs, you must resist. This sounds hard, yet it matters more than you know." He hesitated, puzzled, but promised. Then he slipped the ring onto his finger and wished himself home. In the blink of an eye, the walls of Whiteland vanished. He stood before the familiar cottage by the sea, the smell of salt and tar in his nostrils. His parents could hardly believe their eyes. Their son, who had vanished with the racing boat, now stood before them dressed as a king, with the bearing of one who had seen wonders. They wept and laughed and demanded his story. He told them much, though not all, and they rejoiced to hear that he had a queen of his own. Days passed filled with feasting and talk. Then his mother, proud and delighted, said one morning, "You must go up to the palace and show our king what has become of you. He took you in when you were only a child. He will be glad to see how finely you have grown." His father frowned. "Do not go," he warned. "You have come back to us now. Let us hold fast to this joy. I sense danger in striding too boldly into the king's hall." The young king remembered his promise to his queen to obey his father's wish and not his mother's. For a while he stood firm, but his mother's pleas wore at him. She begged again and again, picturing how grand it would be for their son to stand before his foster father in all his finery. At last, against his own better judgment, he yielded. "Very well," he said, "I will go." Chapter 6. A Broken Promise and a Vanished Queen. He went up to the palace in garments befitting his new rank, velvets and furs, a sword at his side, the ring on his finger. The courtiers stared, murmuring at the sight of this stranger who walked with such quiet authority. The king welcomed him warmly at first, glad to see the boy he had raised returned alive and well. Yet as the day went on, he could not help noticing that the young man's clothing and jewels were finer than his own, his bearing more royal even than his. At last the king said, half jest and half sting, "It is clear you have risen high. You see here my queen, and know her beauty. Yet I have not seen your queen. I begin to wonder if she is as fair as you say." The young king, stung in his pride and his love, answered without thinking, "Would that she stood here now? Then you would see for yourself." The words were barely out of his mouth when the ring on his finger grew hot. A shimmer of air beside him resolved into a figure. His queen stood there in the hall, pale and luminous, just as she had been in Whiteland, but her eyes were full of sorrow. "You did not heed me," she said quietly, and there was pain in every syllable. "You did not obey your father's counsel, nor remember my warning." The young king's heart clenched. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I spoke in haste. I meant no harm." "The harm is done," she replied gently. "You have used both your wishes, the first to return, the second to call me here. I cannot remain in this place. I must go back to Whiteland alone." She reached up and wove a small ring into his hair, resting near his temple. On the inner curve of the ring, her name was inscribed. "Should you ever find your way to me again," she said, "this will help you know that it is truly I." Then, with a look that held both love and grief, she wished herself home and vanished. The hall seemed emptier than before, though filled with staring eyes. The young king stood trembling, knowing that his thoughtless pride had cost him dearly. That night he could not sleep. He walked the shore till dawn, listening to the crash of waves. "I must find her," he said at last. "I must learn where Whiteland lies and how to return, even without wishes." So he set out once more into the wide world, carrying nothing but his determination and the small ring hidden in his hair. Chapter 7. Lord of Beasts and Lord of Birds. He traveled first through deep forests, where the trees grew thick and dark. After many days, he climbed a high hill, from which he could see valleys stretching away, like folds in a gray cloak. There, on the summit, he met a man whose presence made the very animals hold their breath. He sat on a rock with a great horn at his side. "Who are you?" the young king asked. "I am lord over all the beasts of the wood," the man replied. "When I blow this horn, every creature with fur and claw must come to me." The king bowed and explained his quest to find Whiteland and the queen he had lost. "I do not know the way," said the Lord of Beasts, "but perhaps one of my charges does." He raised the horn to his lips and blew a note that rolled through the forest like thunder. From every direction came the rustle and thud of paws. Bears lumbered in, deer stepped shyly between trees, wolves padded at the edges, foxes and hares and countless others gathered, their eyes bright. "Tell me," the man called, "do any of you know where Whiteland lies?" The animals looked at one another and shook their heads or pawed the ground. Not one had seen that pale shore. "Then I cannot help you further," the Lord of Beasts said. "But I have a brother who rules over all the birds of the air. He lives many hundreds of miles from here. These snowshoes will take you to him. Once you arrive, turn the toes back toward me, and they will return on their own." He handed the king a pair of shoes made of bone and tough leather. The king thanked him, put them on, and at once his feet skimmed over rock and stream as lightly as wind over grass. The landscape blurred beneath him until he reached another high place where a second man sat, a great horn beside him. This was the Lord of Birds. Once again, the king told his story. The man nodded and blew his horn. From the sky they came, wheeling and diving, sparrows and swans, hawks and ravens, larks and owls, until the air hummed with wings. The man asked them all if any knew where Whiteland lay. The birds twittered and cried. None had seen it. At last, when nearly all had answered, a long shadow passed over them. An old eagle, feathers ragged from years of flight, descended and settled on a rock, his chest rising slowly. "I have flown far," he said. "For 10 full years I have been away from these skies, yet even I have not seen that land you seek." The king's shoulders drooped. "Take heart," said the Lord of Birds. "I have another brother, Lord of all the fish in the sea. He dwells beyond mountains and rivers, but these shoes will carry you to him. Do not forget to turn the toes back when you arrive." The king bowed again, put on the snowshoes, and was carried swiftly across plains and cliffs, until at last the air grew salt, and he stood beyond a rocky shore. Chapter 8. The Cook from Whiteland. Here sat the third brother, lord over all the fish in the sea. He too carried a horn. The king told his tale once more, and the Lord of Fish nodded thoughtfully. "There is one among my servants who may know what you seek," he said. He blew upon his horn, and the waves stirred. Silver backs broke the surface, fins sliced the water, herring and cod, salmon and seals, great whales lifting their barnacled heads. "Has any of you seen Whiteland?" the Lord of Fish called. The sea creatures murmured among themselves, but none answered yes. At last a long, shadowy shape approached, slow and ponderous. It was an old pike, scarred from many battles, eyes wise and watchful. "Whiteland," the pike said. "Indeed, I know it. I have been cook there these 10 years past. Tomorrow I swim there again, for the queen of Whiteland, whose king is gone, is to wed another." The young king's heart twisted. "Another?" he whispered. "If that is so," said the Lord of Fish, "you have no time to lose, but I will give you some counsel. Not far from here, on a lonely moor, stand 3 brothers. They have stood there 100 years and more, fighting over 3 things: a hat, a cloak, and a pair of boots. Whoever owns those 3 may become invisible and wish himself wherever he pleases. If you go to them, you can offer to judge whose they shall be. Ask to try the items, and once they are upon you, use them as you must." The king bowed low, more grateful than words could say. He found the moor without difficulty. There stood 3 men, faces twisted with frustration, each clutching at the hat, cloak, and boots as they argued. "You shall never have them. They are mine by right, not until the world ends and rises again." "Friends," the king said, stepping between them, "why do you waste your strength in an endless quarrel? Let me test your treasures, and I will render a fair judgment as to who deserves them most." Wearied by centuries of dispute, they agreed readily. He placed the boots on his feet, swung the cloak over his shoulders, and set the hat upon his head. "I will walk a little to see how they perform," he said. "When we meet again, I will tell you my decision." Before they could protest, he wished himself away. The world blurred, bent, and opened. He found himself high in the sky, moving faster than any eagle, faster even than the north wind. Chapter 9, Storming the Wedding. As he flew, he came abreast of the north wind, who roared along on his own errands. "Where are you bound so swiftly?" the north wind bellowed. "To Whiteland," the king shouted back, and in the rushing air he told the spirit all that had befallen him: his marriage, his foolish wish, his long search, and the news of the new wedding. The north wind grinned in his harsh way. "You travel straighter than I," he said. "You have no cliffs to bend around, yet I can still do something for you. When you reach Whiteland, stand upon the steps outside the castle door. I will come with all my strength, as if to blow the walls down. When the new suitor runs out to see what threatens his feast, seize him by the collar and throw him out. I will catch him up and carry him far away. After that, the rest will be between you and your queen." The king thanked him and sped on. Soon the pale shores of Whiteland rose beneath him, the white strand gleaming as he remembered. He wished himself down and stood, invisible, on the castle steps. Inside, music floated from the halls, harps and flutes, the sound of dancing feet. Torches flickered in the windows. The whole place shone with celebration. Then the north wind came. He slammed against the castle walls with all his might. Tiles rattled from the roof, banners snapped and twisted, doors shuddered on their hinges. A howl of wind filled every corridor. Inside, guests cried out. The prince, who was about to marry the Queen of Whiteland, strode to the door to see what disaster threatened his fine new home. The moment he stepped onto the stairs, the young king dropped his invisibility, seized him by the collar, and heaved him outward. The north wind grabbed the unfortunate man before he struck the ground, whirled him up, and carried him off, his cries fading into the shriek of the storm. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then the king straightened his cloak, smoothed the ring hidden in his hair, and walked into the castle. Chapter 10. The ring remembered. The hall within was wide and bright, hung with white banners and garlands. Guests stood in clusters, murmuring in confusion about the vanished bridegroom and the sudden gale. At the far end, upon a raised dais, stood the Queen of Whiteland. She was as lovely as ever, perhaps more so, but sorrow had left its trace in the slight hollows of her cheeks. When she saw the stranger coming toward her, a man thin from travel, his face marked by hardship, she did not recognize him at first. He stopped before her and bowed. "My lady," he said softly. She studied him, uncertain. Then he reached up and drew from his hair the small ring she had woven there, the one bearing her name. Her eyes widened. In an instant, she knew him. Joy broke over her face like dawn. "You have come back," she whispered, all the hurt of their parting swept away by the strength of their bond. "I walk the world to do so," he replied. "Forgive my foolish pride. Let me stand beside you now as I once did and as I should never have left." The guests watched in amazement as the queen embraced the stranger, and the palace servants began to murmur that here was the true king returned. There was no question now of any other wedding. The celebrations were turned in the space of an hour, from the union that had been planned to the reunion that was meant to be. The rightful king and queen of Whiteland were wedded again in open joy, and the story of their parted paths and homecoming spread far beyond the pale shores. Closing reflection, choices, promises, and the road back. The tale of the three princesses of Whiteland is woven from promises, some made rashly, some kept with courage, some broken and paid for dearly. It begins with a fisherman's careless yes, offered in ignorance of what it truly cost. From that moment, a child's life is shaped by forces beyond his control. Yet the boy who is given away does not remain a victim of that bargain. He meets trolls, lions, and buried princesses with a heart ready to endure pain for the sake of others. By bearing lashes not meant for him, he wins freedom for those who were trapped and gains a kingdom and a bride. Later, however, we see that even the bravest heart is not safe from smaller, subtler tests. A thoughtless word, spoken in pride and haste in a king's hall, breaks a promise to the one he loves and sends him wandering the world. The distance between wisdom and folly can be as short as a sentence, yet the story does not end in regret. The young king is willing to walk as far as he must, to cross forests, climb hills, consult beasts and birds and fish, outwit quarrelsome brothers, and catch the north wind by its own path, all to repair what he has broken. He learns that love is not only the joy of winning someone, it is also the patient labor of finding them again when you have lost your way. Perhaps, as you rest after this long journey, you might think of the promises in your own life, the ones you have made to others and the ones you have made to yourself. Some may have been spoken lightly, some with full understanding. This tale suggests that even when a promise has been broken, and the path home seems impossibly long, there may still be a way back if we are willing to face storms, ask for help, and keep walking. May you carry from Whiteland a sense of quiet courage to keep your word when you can, to mend it when you cannot, and to trust that the rings we weave into one another's lives can help us recognize each other again, even after a long separation. This is your narrator, Ali, thanking you for listening and wishing you peaceful journeys, steadfast hearts, and reunions as joyful as any in story or song. For more stories that can help you relax, don't forget to like and subscribe.